Okay, welcome. We're going to look at some of the ways you can create that sort of Dan Winters lighting effect, or at least the basics of it. I'm sure that in every one of his shots, he's doing something a little bit different, flags and scrims and all kinds of things. He's not a formula photographer, and neither should you be, by the way. So, but one of the things that we did notice is he does use a dark field a lot. That's black cards, black material, anything dark so that the skin edges reflect dark. It does use a spray light. That's a light very close to the background. You can choke it up. The closer you move it to the background, the smaller the spray is. Move it back and it'll get bigger. And that has to do with the angle of your camera. So you're going to have to line this up with your camera before you set your subject down, and then move your subject back and forth to get them so that that spray light is exactly where you want it. So as you can see, this is not the type of posing that lets somebody, like, be loose and moving all around and dancing, etc. We've got a very specific geometric thing happen. This background light got to be pretty close to dead center of the lens of the camera. The softbox we brought in over here, large box, large area. It's really close to the camera, and it allows us to add our ambient light. This ambient light's really, really important to bring up the shadows. Slightly opposite, if you'll notice the line right here for how close this is, we bring in our grid, our main light, that brighter area. We set it at f8. We shoot at f8. We are shooting to the small light source. The f4 is our fill. Now, the first thing I do is when I set this up, is I set up my f4 light. Maybe yours is f5.6. It doesn't matter. It's just that's the base light. And then I put my camera at 2 stops brighter light. So if it's f4, 2 stops brighter would be f8. In other words, the light is brighter, not the hole inside the camera. It's actually getting smaller because I'm preparing for brighter light. So f4 is my ambient. I go to 5.6, I go up to f8. So I got my camera set on f8 and I make an exposure. My image should be 2 stops underexposed. I love to shoot tethered when I'm doing this. I have to shoot tethered when I'm doing this, otherwise it takes a little bit longer and you just got to wrestle it a little bit more. What they're wearing has a lot of bearing on how much darker you're going to make this ambient light. Somebody in a black felt suit or something like that is really going to soak up a whole lot more light at 2 stops under than somebody in a gray flannel or a gray silk suit or something like that. So you have to get that underexposed light exactly where you want it. Okay? So maybe maybe this goes up to f4.5. Maybe this goes all the way to 5.6. Maybe you look at it and go, I only want my image to be a stop underexposed. So you set your camera at f8. You bring this ambient light up to 5.6. What does that underexposed image look like? What are the areas and the shadows looking like? Set your camera on f8. Set your light at the distance and power to give you f8. This is where string meters come in. This is where light meters come in. Anything you want to do. And then you make the exposure at that light's exposure, which means the shadow area is going to go underexposed right where it was, but you're going to have a brighter face. Spray light to taste. That's the only other way to say it. There's no method for this spray. What is this background? Is it black muslin? Is it gray wall? Whatever. Spray light to taste. But you'll find it's probably fairly low power. So this is one way of doing this, this kind of light. So we have that main light and an ambient area. Now, let's say you want to do something and you don't want to do it outside. You don't want to do it inside. You want to do it outside. All right, well, let's go ahead and do this. And we'll turn these off. Let's go outside. Shadow area. Shadow area is generally somewhere around F4. Now in this particular case, you're not going to be able to raise the shadow with anything other than your shutter speed. So let's say the shadow measures at 125th of a second at F4. So it's F4, 125th of a second. You then do a photograph at F8, 2 stops, preparing for light being 2 stops brighter. What does your underexposed person in the shadows look like? You can still bring in your black cards if you want, not a problem. But what does this underexposed person 2 stops look like? Is it too dark? Is it just the right amount of darkness for you? Do the pants and the shirts and the eyes and the ears and everything else in this thing, do they still work for you? Because you can use shadow light as your ambient light. There's no reason why you can't. And then you can bring your light in again at F8, and you shoot at F8 with your shadow at F4. Or if you want a little bit more shadow, what you do? What do? What do? You open up your shutter speed. So you go from 1/25th to 100th. Now you've opened up the shadow area by 1/3. And then you go down to 80th. Now you've done 2/3. You go to a 60th. Now you've opened it up a stop. But the F8 stays constant because this flash stays constant. Same with the spray light. You can use spray lights outside as well. So even if you've only got 2 lights, you can use the shadow side or an ambient lit room with even soft ambient light to catch that same method of opening up the shadows and keeping the ambient bright. It takes some experimentation because, as I said, no 2 people are alike, no 2 wardrobes are alike. You're going to get this person might want to be 2 stops under, this person might only want to stop at 1/4 or stop at 1/3 under, or what have you. But you'll find that mix, and you'll find it easier if you're using a light meter or a string meter, which my famous Lighting Essentials string meter, and that will help you along your way. So here's 2 different ways of doing it: one in the ambient light, and one in the studio. And I hope that helps. And I'll see you on the boards.